The AverMedia PhotoPlay was one of several devices from the early to mid-2000s designed for playing a slideshow of photos taken on your digital camera on your TV. But this is the PhotoPlay Plus, which I can't find any information about. As far as I can tell, it was never listed on Aver's website, and I can't find any mention of it in newspaper or magazine or online reviews or ads or articles or any mention or even a photo of this thing ever existing. So I think this may actually be a prototype of a product that was never offered to the public. The most obvious sign that this unit was not a production model is the fact that the product name is simply a paper label that was stuck on the top of the case with some clear tape and wasn't even put on straight. On the top it has an indicator LED, a power button, a menu button, and 4 directional buttons, 2 of which are labeled as Preview and Slideshow. One strange thing is that the Preview and Slideshow buttons appear to be non-functional. When I press the other buttons, you can hear an obvious click as I push them down, but these don't even move. So it seems like they're just decorative. The original PhotoPlay only had 4 buttons on top: Next, Previous, Slideshow, and Power. On the front it has an infrared sensor for a remote control and what looks like a compact flash card slot but is not labeled. I unfortunately did not get that remote control with it. Presumably it would look similar to the one for the original PhotoPlay but might have a few more buttons for its extra features. On the left is a USB Type-B port, the kind you normally find on printers, and more sets of card slots labeled SM, MS, SD, and MMC. Like the original version, it supports all 6 types of memory cards that were then in common use. Those are compact flash cards, microdrives, which use the same interface as compact flash but have a tiny mechanical spinning hard drive in there instead of flash memory, these wafer-thin smart media cards, Sony memory sticks, the original kind, not the later Pro Duo type, and SD cards, again the original kind, not the later SDHC type, and also multimedia cards, the predecessor to SD cards, which I do not have an example of. On the right it has a composite video output, an S-video output, and what looks like a space for a VGA port but is not populated and is covered up with a piece of clear tape. And on the back is the power input jack and a switch, which on the bottom is labeled as PAL/NTSC. That power input jack is helpfully labeled as DC in center positive, but it doesn't tell you the voltage. And on the bottom, this unpopulated VGA port is indeed labeled VGA/SCART RGB. Although I don't know where they would have had room for a SCART jack. That's clearly not large enough, unless they're using some kind of breakout cable. On the bottom it has the typical warnings and notices saying it was made in Taiwan, it was tested to comply with FCC standards, it warns us not to open the case because doing so will void the warranty. It says it's model number S0B3, and yes, if you try to look that up, you'll get absolutely nothing. And also nothing is the serial number. It's blank. According to one review I was able to find, the original PhotoPlay runs on 12 volts DC, although that also wasn't mentioned anywhere on the case or sticker. But before I blindly assume that's also the case with the PhotoPlay Plus and possibly damage it by putting 12 volts into a circuit designed for 5 volts, I think I'm going to do what it says not to do and open the case to see if I can verify the voltage and also just take a look inside. After removing the cover, before I even take a look at the circuitry, one thing I noticed is that those 2 buttons that did not move when I pushed on them are glued in place. That's definitely not something you would see in a production unit. But on the circuit board there are indeed switches installed underneath where those 2 buttons would push down if they weren't glued in place. and they do appear to be functional, so that's weird. The main chip on the board is an AverMedia AV6006B with a date code of the 21st week of 2003, and next to it are the card slots. And there's that unpopulated VGA port, which definitely did not have anything ever soldered into it. The second largest chip on the top side of the board is this 39VF020, which is a 2 megabit or 256 kilobyte flash memory chip. Here is the power input section of the circuitry. It doesn't have any obvious voltage regulator. I suppose this large resistor could be used to drop the voltage, but that would be terribly inefficient. So when I'm going to test this, I'll use the cautious approach of powering it with 5 volts initially, and if it works, I'll just leave it there, and if it doesn't, I'll gradually increase the voltage until it starts working. Here's the underside of the board, and holy moly, that's a lot of bodge wires and glue. This definitely does not look like a production-ready circuit board. Just like we saw in the case, it has the model number of S0B3, and that looks like a date code of the 5th week of 2004. There's another 39VF020 on the bottom of the board, so that's another 2 megabit flash memory chip. This big chip is 16 megabytes of SD RAM. And this GL816 is a USB 2.0 card reader chip. I tried to remove this glue from the buttons, but whatever kind of glue they used is actually still tacky and flexible. It's not like hot glue, which turns rock hard when it dries, so this stuff isn't budging. Perhaps some acetone would help to dissolve it, but I'd be afraid that it would also dissolve the surrounding plastic, and I don't want to damage that, so I'll just have to leave this glue in place. I have it connected to 5 volts DC and a small TV via its S-Video output, and when I turn it on, it displays the AverMedia logo, and then it says no card. So I put a bunch of the photos I've taken over the years onto this memory stick, and I'll insert that into the PhotoPlay Plus. And when I do that, it says wait on the screen for a few moments, and I can see the indicator LED flickering as it's reading the card, and in a few more seconds it shows a photo on the screen, so it works. It displays some information about your photos on the screen, such as the date and time they were taken and how large the file is, and you can press the up and down arrow buttons to step through your photos, and it shows several different kinds of wipe effects while doing so. But I noticed pressing the menu button doesn't actually bring up a menu. Instead, all it does is start or pause the automatic slideshow. That matches the functionality of the slideshow button on the original PhotoPlay, which also has play and stop symbols engraved into it. I encountered this message when attempting to display one of my photos. Cannot support. Resolution is over 3200 by 2400, which means it does not support photos larger than 7.68 megapixels. That's an improvement over the original PhotoPlay, which says right on the box it supports up to 2832 by 2128 resolution, or a maximum of 6 megapixels. And all other image file types besides JPEG are completely unsupported. It just skips over the files as if they don't even exist. And one other thing I noticed is that it does not properly support aspect ratios other than 4:3. For example, I prefer to take most of my photos in 3:2 aspect ratio, which matches that of 35mm film. But in this case, when viewed on the PhotoPlay Plus, you can see the aspect ratio is not correct. The wheels on the car are supposed to be round, and they look more like ovals. And the distortion gets even worse when viewing a photo taken at 16:9 aspect ratio. So any photo you view on this thing will be conformed to 4:3 regardless of its original aspect ratio. And yes, I did try moving the cover and pushing these switches which these buttons would press if they hadn't been glued in place, but they seem to have no discernible effect. And when you have it connected to a computer via USB, it acts as a card reader, which is handy. Although I had no such luck getting it to work as a card reader in Windows 7. That USB card reader function would have been the one main new feature of the PhotoPlay Plus versus the original PhotoPlay, and perhaps AverMedia decided there wouldn't be enough demand for it, so they canceled it before it finished development. That's my theory, anyway, based on the fact that the hardware is obviously not production ready, and there seems to be no record of this product ever existing. Yet somehow I found it in a thrift store here in New Jersey. And don't you love my backdrop? It's just a couple of manila folders and pieces of paper.